Hello again. Who do you represent? That might sound a very strange question unless you happen to have a particular job or role which involves representing a group or organisation. Perhaps you're some kind of ambassador. For a brief time, some while before I came into the work I do now, I had a role in university admissions. At open days, I would meet prospective students and often also their parents. They wanted to know whether the department I was part of was offering the kind of course they were interested in, and they wanted to know whether the university was one they wanted. We used to try very hard to encourage people to come to open days because we were a matter of a few minutes' walk away from some stunning scenery, and we knew that if people actually came to visit and saw the place, then they were more likely to accept our offers. And all the time I was involved on those days, I was very aware that I was representing my subject, my department, and my university. So it came as a bit of a surprise to me in candidating and in ministerial training when an emphasis was put on realising what it meant to be a representative person. At the time, I found it quite hard to understand why they thought it was any different to some other jobs. I do understand now that it is a bit different in that there's really no turning off from it, but I'm still not sure about the emphasis put on it. That's perhaps more to do with my theological understanding of what it is to be a minister. Of course, I am a representative in the sense that when people hear me say things, when they see me do things, they hear and see a Methodist minister. But the focus of the church's ministry doesn't have to be in me just because I have this role. I happen to think that this is an unfortunate shift in our theology because it's edging towards saying, I am representative of Christ. And I would say I am no more or less representative of Christ than any other Christian. I know many in the church will disagree with me. I know that because some in the church do say that about our ministry, that there are ways in which presbyters are particularly representative of Christ. And that's fine. Well, it's not fine, actually. I disagree quite strongly, and it's something I find I care deeply about. But we're not all going to agree on everything, and that lack of a need to agree on absolutely everything, that's what's fine. Anyhow, whoever I think is representing Christ, it's now always, at least in the back of my mind, and usually a fair bit further forward than that I will be seen as somehow representing the Methodist Church. Something which made the news recently is the vigil for Sarah Everard. There are many things we could reflect on, such as the balance to be struck between protest and social distancing, or the power the police are given and how they use it, the question of why black women are murdered and only just make it into the news, but a young white woman going missing and being murdered is headline news for days and causes people to want to gather and pay their respects and to protest against the things which led up to that horrendous event. But today I'd like to think about that question of what it means to be representative. At the time, the Duchess of Cambridge went along to the vigil apparently in a personal capacity to pay her respects. Of course, being who she is, she made it into the news even though it was a personal, supposedly private visit. Yet this week, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Cressida Dick, sidestepped a question in a radio interview about whether it was legal for the Duchess to have attended the vigil by saying that she was probably there for work. As a member of the royal family, turning up at stuff and being a presence is part of the job. It was, after all, the justification for their big trip by train round the country while most of us were in lockdown. Apparently it raises morale and makes people feel valued. So you can argue it would be the kind of thing she would do for what you would call her work. The work of the royal family may not be a normal job with money paid for doing the work, but then nor is what I do a normal job with money paid for doing the work. Of course I do get money, but it's officially so that I don't need to look for other work. I rather suspect the amounts of money involved differ somewhat between the Methodist ministry and the royal family, but the principle may be surprisingly similar. But I do find it interesting that something which was spoken of at the time as having been done in a personal capacity, in other words, don't read into this that the royal family supports the vigil, is now being spoken of as being for work. Because if it was really private, then it might have been illegal. As it is, the police position now appears to be that attendance might have been technically legal for the member of the royal family who was perhaps there for work, but illegal for other people who were not there for a reason allowable under COVID regulations. Yet even if the Duchess was there in a personal, private capacity, it made the news precisely because she is a member of the royal family. If you are a member of the royal family, you can't really turn it on and off. There is quite possibly not really any such thing as a private, personal capacity for a royal. Rightly or wrongly, you cannot escape the fact that you are a member of the royal family. You are always a representative of the monarchy. When I say you, of course, I don't think I mean literally you, because I think it's a reasonable assumption that no members of the actual royal family are listening to this. But the topic does relate to you and to me because of that question I started with. Who do you represent? You may not be a member of the royal family which keeps turning up in the papers, but if you are among the followers of Jesus, then there is a tradition which suggests that you are a member of a royal family. You are part of a royal priesthood, as you'll find written in the first letter of Peter. In religious language, a priest is a representative of God to the people and of the people to God. That's what the church is if it is a royal priesthood, a representative of God to the people and of the people to God. That's who we represent as part of the church. And now I'm not talking about any one particular denomination such as the Methodist Church. I'm talking about the church in general, the whole of the Church of God. I personally am indeed a representative of the Methodist Church, but we collectively are representative of God and God in Christ to the people more widely, and representative of the people more widely to God. As I record and publish this, it is Maundy Thursday, part of the week when we remember in particular the last few days of the life of Jesus. In this Holy Week, we see what it is for God to know the joys and pains of being human. We see what it is we are called to follow in Jesus. It is a way of love which makes a stand against the misuse of power, which shows that the real royalty might look like it gets put to death as a rebel, but which actually leads the way to God's life. It's quite a challenge to be representative of that. But we don't hold it alone. In fact, we only hold it together. And the message of this week, above all other weeks, is that God knows what it is like to be human. There are things about who we are which we can't turn off, even if we want to. And God knows all that, and still calls people to join that real royal family, the royal priesthood. A calling to come and visit, come and actually see the place, because there's always an open day on. God bless. See you soon.